Single mom gave stranded hiker a lift home, unaware he's a tech billionaire. It was supposed to be just another long, exhausting day for Naomi Carter, a struggling single mom doing everything she could to provide for her 3-year-old daughter, Mia. Bills were piling up, and her old car was barely holding together. But when she saw a man stranded on the side of a quiet highway, she made a split-second decision that would change her life forever. Would you have stopped to help a stranger in the middle of nowhere? Let me know in the comments. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful story family. Before we begin, I want to share something personal with you. We put so much love and effort into these videos, hoping to touch hearts and spread messages of kindness, humility, and love. If this story moves you, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. Naomi Carter leaned against the chipped counter of the diner, her apron stained with coffee splashes and grease from a long morning shift. The clock above the register ticked past noon, each second dragging like a weight on her shoulders. Her caramel skin glistened faintly with sweat under the harsh lights, and her dark eyes flickered toward the door every time it swung open, hoping for a customer with a decent tip. In her pocket, her phone buzzed again, another reminder from her landlord. Rent was due 3 days ago, and the $47 in her bank account wasn't going to cut it. "Mommy, are we gonna eat pancakes today?" Mia's small voice piped up from the corner booth, where she sat coloring on a napkin with a stubby crayon. Her big, curious eyes sparkled, oblivious to the strain pulling at her mother's face. Naomi forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Not today, baby. But I promise soon, okay?" She turned away quickly, hiding the sting in her chest. Pancakes. Such a simple thing, and yet it felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Not with daycare costs climbing and the sedan's gas gauge hovering near empty. The bell above the door jingled, and a gruff trucker shuffled in, his boots thudding against the linoleum. "Coffee, black," he muttered, barely glancing at her as he slid into a stool. Naomi nodded, pouring the steaming liquid into a chipped mug. Her hands moved on autopilot. Years of waitressing had made it second nature. But her mind churned. She'd picked up an extra shift cleaning offices tonight, but even that wouldn't cover the hole she was in. Mia deserved better. A real home. A mom who wasn't always one paycheck away from collapse. "Miss, you gonna stand there daydreaming or bring me a menu?" the trucker barked, snapping her back to reality. "Sorry, sir. Right here." She slid the laminated sheet across the counter, her voice tight but polite. He grunted and she stepped back, glancing at Mia again. The little girl was humming softly, her tiny fingers smudging red crayon across the napkin. Naomi's heart ached. She'd promised herself she'd never let Mia feel the weight of their struggles, but lately that promise was getting harder to keep. The afternoon dragged on, a blur of orders and forced smiles. By the time her shift ended at 4, her feet throbbed and her tips totaled a measly $12. She scooped Mia into her arms, the toddler's warmth a fleeting comfort against the chill of reality. "Let's go, sweet pea," she murmured, kissing her forehead. The sedan sputtered to life outside, its engine coughing like it was as tired as she was. She buckled Mia into the fraying car seat, her fingers brushing against a new tear in the fabric. Another thing she couldn't fix. The drive home was quiet, the radio broken months ago. Mia chattered about her day at daycare, something about a boy named Timmy and a lost crayon, while Naomi nodded absently, her mind on the eviction notice she'd found taped to their apartment door last week. She'd begged the landlord for an extension, promising to pay by the end of the month. He'd given her until Friday. 2 days. 2 days to scrape together $800 she didn't have. "Mommy, look!" Mia's voice jolted her. She pointed out the window at a man standing on the side of the rural highway, his thumb jutted out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a damp jacket and jeans that looked too clean for a hitchhiker. A backpack rested at his feet, and rain streaked his face as he squinted against the drizzle. Naomi's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't stop for strangers, couldn't afford the risk. But something about him made her hesitate. Maybe it was the way he stood, shoulders slumped like he'd been walking for hours, or the way his eyes caught hers through the windshield, steady and unthreatening. The sedan rolled to a stop before she could talk herself out of it. She cracked the window just enough to hear him over the patter of rain. "You okay out there?" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. The man stepped closer, hands raised slightly as if to show he meant no harm. "Been better," he said, his tone low and rough, but with an edge of warmth. "Car broke down a few miles back, just trying to get somewhere dry." Naomi studied him. His face was unshaven, dark hair plastered to his forehead, but there was something in his posture, confidence maybe, that didn't match the stranded hiker story. Still, the rain was picking up, and Mia was watching her with those wide, trusting eyes. "Where are you headed?" she asked, keeping her foot hovering over the gas pedal. "Anywhere with a roof, honestly," he said, offering a faint smile. "I can pay for the trouble." Her ears perked up at that. Cash. She shouldn't trust him, shouldn't even consider it, but the weight of that eviction notice pressed against her chest. "How much?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out a damp wad of bills. "50 now. More when we get wherever you're going. $50. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than she'd made all day. She glanced at Mia, then back at him. "Get in," she said, finally, unlocking the passenger door. "But you try anything, I've got pepper spray and a mean right hook." He chuckled, a sound that surprised her with its ease. "Noted." He slid into the seat, dripping water onto the cracked upholstery, and set his backpack between his knees. Up close, he smelled faintly of cedar and rain, and his hands, strong, calloused, didn't look like they belonged to someone who'd been stranded long. "I'm Naomi," she said, pulling back onto the road. "That's Mia." "Hi, Mia," he said, turning to flash a grin at the toddler. She giggled, hiding her face behind her hands. "And you are?" Naomi pressed, her eyes flicking between him and the road. "Call me Jack," he said after a beat, his voice smooth but guarded. "Thanks for this, Naomi. Most people don't stop." "Yeah, well, I'm not most people," she shot back, though her tone softened. "What's your story, Jack? Car trouble doesn't explain why you're out here in the middle of nowhere." He shifted in his seat, gazing out the window as the rain streaked the glass. "Long day," he said simply. "Needed to clear my head. Didn't expect the weather to turn." She didn't buy it, not entirely. His clothes were too neat, his demeanor too calm for someone caught off guard. But she let it drop, focusing on the road ahead. The sedan rattled as they drove, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Mia started singing a nonsense song, and Jack tapped his fingers lightly on his knee, almost in rhythm. "You're good with kids," Naomi said, surprising herself with the observation. "Got a niece about her age," he replied, his voice softening. "She's a handful, but the best kind." Naomi nodded, a flicker of warmth cutting through her exhaustion. "Mia's my whole world. Keeps me going, you know." "I can see that," he said, glancing at her. His eyes held hers for a moment, searching before he looked away. "You're doing a hell of a job." The compliment caught her off guard, and she swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. No one ever noticed. Not really. She was just the waitress, the cleaner, the mom who barely held it together. "Thanks," she muttered, her voice thick. They drove on, the rain a steady drum against the roof. Jack pulled out his phone, frowning at the screen before tucking it away. "No signal out here," he said, almost to himself. "Welcome to my life," Naomi quipped, though her mind snagged on the gesture. Who was he checking for? A wife? A friend? Someone who'd care he was gone? She shook off the thought. None of her business. "So, Jack," she said, breaking the quiet, "you said you'd pay more when we get somewhere. Where's that gonna be? I'm not driving you cross-country." He laughed, a low rumble that filled the car. "Fair enough. How about the next town? I'll figure it out from there." "Next town's 20 miles, she said, eyeing the gas gauge. "Hope you're good for it." "I am," he said, and there was that confidence again, steady and unshaken. "You'll see." She didn't know why, but she believed him. Maybe it was the way he said it, like a promise he'd already kept. Or maybe she was just too tired to argue. Either way, the road stretched ahead, and the stranger beside her felt less like a risk and more like a question she couldn't yet answer. The rain thickened, blurring the windshield, and Naomi flicked on the wipers. They squeaked against the glass, a grating sound that matched the tension coiling in her gut. $50 was a start, but it wouldn't fix everything. And Jack, whoever he was, had a story he wasn't telling. She could feel it, heavy in the air between them. As Mia's singing faded into sleepy murmurs, Naomi stole another glance at him. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the horizon, and for the first time she wondered if stopping for him might change more than just her bank account. Naomi Carter leaned against the chipped counter of the diner, her apron stained with coffee splashes and grease from a long morning shift. The clock above the register ticked past noon, each second dragging like a weight on her shoulders. Her caramel skin glistened faintly with sweat under the harsh lights, and her dark eyes flickered toward the door every time it swung open, hoping for a customer with a decent tip. In her pocket, her phone buzzed again, another reminder from her landlord. Rent was due 3 days ago, and the $47 in her bank account wasn't going to cut it. "Mommy, are we gonna eat pancakes today?" Mia's small voice piped up from the corner booth, where she sat coloring on a napkin with a stubby crayon. Her big, curious eyes sparkled, oblivious to the strain pulling at her mother's face. Naomi forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Not today, baby. But I promise soon, okay?" She turned away quickly, hiding the sting in her chest. Pancakes. Such a simple thing, and yet it felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Not with daycare costs climbing and the sedan's gas gauge hovering near empty. The bell above the door jingled and a gruff trucker shuffled in, his boots thudding against the linoleum. "Coffee, black," he muttered, barely glancing at her as he slid into a stool. Naomi nodded, pouring the steaming liquid into a chipped mug. Her hands moved on autopilot. Years of waitressing had made it second nature. But her mind churned. She'd picked up an extra shift cleaning offices tonight, but even that wouldn't cover the hole she was in. Mia deserved better. A real home. A mom who wasn't always one paycheck away from collapse. "Miss, you gonna stand there daydreaming or bring me a menu?" the trucker barked, snapping her back to reality. "Sorry, sir. Right here." She slid the laminated sheet across the counter, her voice tight but polite. He grunted, and she stepped back, glancing at Mia again. The little girl was humming softly, her tiny fingers smudging red crayon across the napkin. Naomi's heart ached. She'd promised herself she'd never let Mia feel the weight of their struggles, but lately, that promise was getting harder to keep. The afternoon dragged on, a blur of orders and forced smiles. By the time her shift ended at 4, her feet throbbed, and her tips totaled a measly $12. She scooped Mia into her arms, the toddler's warmth a fleeting comfort against the chill of reality. "Let's go, sweet pea," she murmured, kissing her forehead. The sedan sputtered to life outside, its engine coughing like it was as tired as she was. She buckled Mia into the fraying car seat, her fingers brushing against a new tear in the fabric. Another thing she couldn't fix. The drive home was quiet, the radio broken months ago. Mia chattered about her day at daycare, something about a boy named Timmy and a lost crayon, while Naomi nodded absently, her mind on the eviction notice she'd found taped to their apartment door last week. She'd begged the landlord for an extension, promising to pay by the end of the month. He'd given her until Friday. 2 days. 2 days to scrape together $800 she didn't have. "Mommy, look!" Mia's voice jolted her. She pointed out the window at a man standing on the side of the rural highway, his thumb jutted out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a damp jacket and jeans that looked too clean for a hitchhiker. A backpack rested at his feet, and rain streaked his face as he squinted against the drizzle. Naomi's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't stop for strangers. Couldn't afford the risk, but something about him made her hesitate. Maybe it was the way he stood, shoulders slumped like he'd been walking for hours, or the way his eyes caught hers through the windshield, steady and unthreatening. The sedan rolled to a stop before she could talk herself out of it. She cracked the window just enough to hear him over the patter of rain. "You okay out there?" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. The man stepped closer, hands raised slightly as if to show he meant no harm. "Been better," he said, his tone low and rough, but with an edge of warmth. "Car broke down a few miles back, just trying to get somewhere dry." Naomi studied him. His face was unshaven, dark hair plastered to his forehead, but there was something in his posture, confidence maybe, that didn't match the stranded hiker story. Still, the rain was picking up, and Mia was watching her with those wide, trusting eyes. "Where are you headed?" she asked, keeping her foot hovering over the gas pedal. "Anywhere with a roof, honestly," he said, offering a faint smile. "I can pay for the trouble." Her ears perked up at that. Cash. She shouldn't trust him, shouldn't even consider it, but the weight of that eviction notice pressed against her chest. "How much?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out a damp wad of bills. "50 now. More when we get wherever you're going." $50. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than she'd made all day. She glanced at Mia, then back at him. "Get in," she said finally, unlocking the passenger door. "But you try anything, I've got pepper spray and a mean right hook." He chuckled, a sound that surprised her with its ease. "Noted." He slid into the seat, dripping water onto the cracked upholstery, and set his backpack between his knees. Up close, he smelled faintly of cedar and rain, and his hands, strong, calloused, didn't look like they belonged to someone who'd been stranded long. "I'm Naomi," she said, pulling back onto the road. "That's Mia." "Hi, Mia," he said, turning to flash a grin at the toddler. She giggled, hiding her face behind her hands. "And you are?" Naomi pressed, her eyes flicking between him and the road. "Call me Ryan," he said after a beat, his voice smooth but guarded. "Thanks for this, Naomi. Most people don't stop." "Yeah, well, I'm not most people," she shot back, though her tone softened. "What's your story, Ryan? Car trouble doesn't explain why you're out here in the middle of nowhere." He shifted in his seat, gazing out the window as the rain streaked the glass. "Long day," he said simply. "Needed to clear my head. Didn't expect the weather to turn." She didn't buy it, not entirely. His clothes were too neat, his demeanor too calm for someone caught off guard. But she let it drop, focusing on the road ahead. The sedan rattled as they drove, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Mia started singing a nonsense song, and Ryan tapped his fingers lightly on his knee, almost in rhythm. "You're good with kids," Naomi said, surprising herself with the observation. "Got a niece about her age," he replied, his voice softening. "She's a handful, but the best kind." Naomi nodded, a flicker of warmth cutting through her exhaustion. "Mia's my whole world, keeps me going, you know." "I can see that," he said, glancing at her. His eyes held hers for a moment, searching before he looked away. "You're doing a hell of a job." The compliment caught her off guard, and she swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. No one ever noticed. Not really. She was just the waitress, the cleaner, the mom who barely held it together. "Thanks," she muttered, her voice thick. They drove on, the rain a steady drum against the roof. Ryan pulled out his phone, frowning at the screen before tucking it away. "No signal out here," he said, almost to himself. "Welcome to my life," Naomi quipped, though her mind snagged on the gesture. Who was he checking for? A wife? A friend? Someone who'd care he was gone? She shook off the thought. None of her business. "So, Ryan," she said, breaking the quiet, "you said you'd pay more when we get somewhere. Where's that gonna be? I'm not driving you cross-country." He laughed, a low rumble that filled the car. "Fair enough. How about the next town? I'll figure it out from there." "Next town's 20 miles, she said, eyeing the gas gauge. "Hope you're good for it." "I am," he said, and there was that confidence again, steady and unshaken. "You'll see." She didn't know why, but she believed him. Maybe it was the way he said it, like a promise he'd already kept, or maybe she was just too tired to argue. Either way, the road stretched ahead, and the stranger beside her felt less like a risk and more like a question she couldn't yet answer. The rain thickened, blurring the windshield, and Naomi flicked on the wipers. They squeaked against the glass, a grating sound that matched the tension coiling in her gut. $50 was a start, but it wouldn't fix everything. And Ryan, whoever he was, had a story he wasn't telling. She could feel it, heavy in the air between them. As Mia's singing faded into sleepy murmurs, Naomi stole another glance at him. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the horizon, and for the first time she wondered if stopping for him might change more than just her bank account. The road twisted through the countryside, flanked by dense trees that loomed like silent sentinels in the downpour. Naomi kept one hand near her phone, tucked into the center console, her fingers brushing the edge of the pepper spray canister she'd stashed there months ago. Ryan might seem harmless, handsome even, with that rugged jawline and those tired hazel eyes. But she wasn't naive. People lied, people hid things, and she had Mia to protect. From the back seat, Mia's voice broke the quiet. "Are you a superhero?" she asked, peering at Ryan with unabashed curiosity. He turned, a grin tugging at his lips. "Not quite, kiddo. Just a guy who's bad at picking cars." Mia giggled, kicking her legs against the seat. "Mommy's car is loud, like a dragon." "Yeah, it's got character," Ryan said, glancing at Naomi with a playful glint in his eye. She smirked despite herself. "Character's one word for it. Falling apart's another." "Hey, it's getting us where we need to go," he said, settling back into his seat. "That's more than I can say for mine." Naomi's curiosity flared again. "What happened to it anyway?" "Your car engine gave out," he said, shrugging. "Left it a few miles back. Figured I'd walk until I found help." "In this rain?" she pressed, her tone skeptical. "Most people would have stayed put." "Most people aren't as stubborn as me," he replied, his grin widening. "Besides, I like the challenge." There it was again, that easy confidence, like he could bend the world to his will. It grated on her, but it also intrigued her. She shifted in her seat, keeping her eyes on the road. "You live in the city?" "Something like that," he said, his voice dropping a notch. She frowned. "You're being weirdly vague." "Maybe I like being mysterious," he shot back, his tone light but his eyes sharp, watching her reaction. Naomi snorted. "Mysterious doesn't pay my bills, Ryan. You got a job? A family? Something to prove you're not just some drifter." He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. "I work. Remotely," he said finally. "No family nearby. Just me." "Remotely," she echoed, her suspicion deepening. "What's that mean? You a writer? A salesman?" "Something like that," he said again, and she could hear the dodge in his voice. He reached for his phone, tapping the blank screen before sighing. "Dead battery. Guess I'm off the grid for now." "Lucky me," she muttered, though her mind raced. No signal, no car, no clear answers. Who was this guy? She glanced at him again, taking in the details she'd missed before. The expensive-looking watch peeking out from his sleeve, the way his boots, though muddy, were barely worn. He didn't fit the stranded hiker mold, and that gnawed at her. The road ahead narrowed, and a flash of orange caught her eye. She slowed the sedan, squinting through the rain. A row of traffic cones blocked the lane, flanked by a sign that read, "Road closed, detour." Naomi cursed under her breath. Great, just what I needed. Problem? Ryan asked, leaning forward. Yeah, this is the only way to town, she said, gripping the wheel tighter. Now we've got to loop around through the back roads. Adds another half hour at least. He nodded, unfazed. I'm in no rush. You? She shot him a look. I've got a kid to feed and a job to get to. Time's not exactly on my side. Fair enough, he said, settling back. Lead the way. The detour veered off the highway, plunging them into a maze of gravel roads lined with overgrown brush. The sedan jolted over potholes, the suspension groaning in protest. Mia whimpered from the back seat, and Naomi reached back to pat her leg. It's okay, baby. Just a bumpy ride. Ryan watched her, his expression unreadable. You do this a lot? Play taxi for strangers? First time, she admitted, her voice tight. Don't make me regret it. I won't, he said, and there was a weight to his words that made her pause. She wanted to press him, to demand more than vague half-answers, but the road demanded her focus. The rain hammered down, turning the gravel into a slick mess, and the wipers struggled to keep up. Minutes stretched into a tense silence, broken only by the rumble of the engine and Mia's soft humming. Then Ryan spoke, his voice low. You ever feel like life's throwing you curveballs just to see how much you can take? Naomi glanced at him, caught off guard by the shift in tone. Every damn day, she said, her honesty surprising her. You? More than you'd believe, he replied, his gaze distant. Sometimes you've got to step away to figure out what's worth fighting for. She didn't know what to make of that. Was he running from something? Hiding? The questions piled up, but before she could ask, the sedan lurched, a sharp thud echoing from the undercarriage. Naomi slammed on the brakes, her heart pounding. What the hell was that? Ryan straightened, alert. Sounded like you hit something. Pull over, I'll check. She hesitated, then eased the car onto the shoulder. The rain pounded the roof as Ryan stepped out, disappearing into the blur of water and shadows. Naomi kept her hand on the pepper spray, her pulse racing. What if this was a trick? What if he'd planned this? She glanced at Mia, who was clutching her crayon-stained napkin, eyes wide. It's okay, sweet pea, she whispered, though her own nerves were frayed. He's just looking. Ryan reappeared a moment later, soaked to the bone. He leaned into the open door, water dripping from his hair. Rock in the road, bent your muffler, but it's still drivable. We're good. You sure? She asked, her voice sharp. Positive, he said, climbing back in. I've dealt with worse. She studied him, the tension in her chest easing slightly. You're handy for a guy with a dead car. He grinned, wiping rain from his face. I've got my talents. The car rolled forward again, the muffler rattling louder than before. Naomi's mind churned. Ryan was too calm, too capable. He wasn't just some random hiker, and that watch glinting faintly on his wrist looked like it cost more than her rent. Who was he, really? And why did she feel like every mile they drove was pulling her deeper into something she couldn't control? The detour stretched on, the road winding through a forest that seemed to swallow the daylight. Mia dozed off, her head lolling against the car seat, and the silence between Naomi and Ryan grew heavier. She decided to push him again. So, Ryan, no family, no phone, no car. What's waiting for you in the next town? He didn't answer right away, his fingers drumming lightly on his knee. A fresh start, maybe, he said finally, his voice soft. What about you? What keeps you going? Mia, she said without hesitation. Everything I do is for her, even picking up strangers in the rain. He nodded, a flicker of something, guilt, gratitude, crossing his face. She's lucky to have you. Yeah, well, luck's been in short supply lately, she said, bitterness creeping into her tone. But we manage. You're tougher than you give yourself credit for, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. She didn't respond, focusing on the road as it curved sharply ahead. Then, out of nowhere, headlights flared in the rearview mirror, bright and blinding. Naomi squinted, her grip tightening on the wheel. A truck roared up behind them, its engine growling over the rain. It was too close, way too close. Hold on, she snapped, accelerating slightly. The truck matched her speed, its horn blaring once, twice. Panic clawed at her chest. What the hell do they want? Ryan twisted in his seat, peering back. I don't know. Just keep driving. The truck swerved, pulling alongside them, and Naomi caught a glimpse of the driver, a man in a dark cap, his face obscured. He gestured wildly, pointing ahead, but the rain and the dark made it impossible to tell what he meant. Then, with a final honk, the truck peeled off down a side road, vanishing into the night. Naomi let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling on the wheel. What was that about? No idea, Ryan said, but his voice was tight, his eyes scanning the road behind them. Maybe just some local nut. Maybe, she said, though she didn't believe it. Something about the encounter felt off, and Ryan's sudden tension only deepened her unease. He knew more than he was letting on. She was sure of it now. The rain eased as they neared the edge of the forest, the lights of the next town flickering in the distance. Naomi's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the night. A stranded hiker with a dead phone and a fat wallet, a truck chasing them down a back road, and Ryan sitting beside her, his calm facade cracking just enough to hint at something bigger. Almost there, she said, breaking the silence. You still good for that extra cash? Better than good, he replied, his tone steady again. You'll see. She nodded, but the knot in her stomach tightened. Whatever Ryan was hiding, it was following them, and she had a sinking feeling that dropping him off wouldn't be the end of it. The rain eased as Naomi guided the sedan toward the faint glow of the next town, the headlights cutting through the damp night. Her hands still trembled from the truck's sudden appearance, its blinding lights and blaring horn replaying in her mind. Beside her, Ryan sat rigid, his earlier ease replaced by a quiet intensity that set her nerves on edge. Whatever that chase had been, it wasn't random. She could feel it in her bones. And Ryan's clipped "no idea" didn't fool her. He knew something, and the longer he dodged her questions, the more that knot in her stomach tightened. Almost there, she said, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine. You still good for that extra cash? Better than good, he replied, his tone steadying as he flashed a faint smile. You'll see. She nodded, but her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, half expecting those headlights to flare again. The road ahead was empty, though, and the lights of the town grew brighter, promising a drop-off point where she could leave Ryan and his mysteries behind. Mia snored softly in the back seat, her tiny breaths a fragile anchor in the storm of Naomi's thoughts. Just a few more miles and she'd be free of this night, of him. Then the sedan jolted, a harsh grinding sound erupting from beneath the hood. Naomi's heart sank as the steering wheel stiffened in her hands. No, 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 she muttered, pumping the gas pedal. The car shuddered, coughed, and rolled to a dead stop in the middle of the wooded road, surrounded by towering pines that swallowed the moonlight. Damn it! She slammed her palm against the wheel, the sting sharp against her skin. Mia stirred, whimpering, and Naomi forced her voice to soften. It's okay, baby. Mommy's got this. Ryan leaned forward, peering at the dashboard. What happened? What do you think? She snapped, yanking the key from the ignition. This piece of junk finally gave up. Perfect timing, right? She shoved the door open and stepped into the chilly air, the damp earth crunching under her sneakers. The hood creaked as she popped it, though she had no idea what she was looking for, just steam and a tangle of rusted parts staring back at her. Ryan climbed out, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. Let me take a look. She shot him a glare. You a mechanic now, too? What else you hiding? He raised his hands, that easy grin flickering back. Just trying to help. I've picked up a few tricks over the years. Yeah, well, good luck, she said, stepping aside. It's been on its last legs for months. He bent over the engine, his silhouette framed by the headlights, as he poked at the mess of wires and hoses. Naomi crossed her arms, her breath fogging in the cold. The woods pressed in around them, the rustle of leaves and distant hoots of an owl amplifying the silence. She pulled her phone from her pocket, 0 bars. Of course, no tow truck, no help, just her, Mia, and a stranger she still didn't trust. Ryan straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. Fuel pumps shot. We're not going anywhere tonight. Tonight? Her voice rose, panic edging in. I've got a shift in a few hours. I can't just sit here. We don't have a choice, he said, his calm infuriating her. It's late. No one's coming by and there's no signal. We'll figure it out in the morning. Morning? She laughed, a bitter sound. You're kidding, right? I've got a kid in there. We can't... Naomi, he cut in, his voice firm but not harsh. We're stuck. Best we can do is stay warm and wait it out. She stared at him, her chest heaving. He was right, and she hated it, hated the helplessness, the way this night kept spiraling out of her control. Fine, she said finally, her jaw tight, but don't think I'm letting my guard down. He nodded, his eyes meeting hers. Wouldn't expect you to. They climbed back into the car, the seats damp and cold. Naomi pulled Mia's blanket from the floor, tucking it around her daughter as the toddler blinked sleepily. Mommy? Mia murmured, reaching out. Right here, sweet pea, Naomi whispered, brushing her hair back. Go back to sleep. Mia's eyes drifted to Ryan, wide and curious, even in her drowsiness. Can I sit with him? Naomi froze, her protective instincts flaring. No, baby, you stay. It's okay, Ryan said softly, patting his lap. If she wants to, I don't bite. Mia giggled, already squirming out of her car seat. Before Naomi could protest, the little girl clambered into Ryan's arms, curling up against his chest like he was an old friend. Naomi's stomach twisted, a mix of unease and something she couldn't name. She didn't trust him, not even close, but Mia's instant comfort with him threw her off balance. You don't trust me, do you? Ryan said, his voice low as he adjusted the blanket over Mia. Nope, Naomi replied, her tone flat. And I don't plan on starting tonight. He chuckled, a quiet sound that didn't match the tension in the air. Fair enough. You're smart to keep your eyes open. She didn't respond, settling into the driver's seat with her back stiff, one hand resting near the pepper spray. The car was a flimsy shield against the night, the woods stretching endlessly around them. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made her flinch, her exhaustion warring with the need to stay alert. Ryan sat still, Mia's soft snores rising between them, his gaze fixed on the windshield as if he could see through the dark. Hours crawled by, the cold seeping through the cracked windows. Naomi's eyelids grew heavy, but she fought it, her mind racing with questions. Who was Ryan, really? That truck, had it been looking for him? And why did he carry himself like someone who'd never known desperation, even stranded in the rain? She glanced at him, his profile sharp against the faint glow of the dashboard. His watch glinted again, a detail that nagged at her. Too expensive for a drifter, too clean for a hiker. A shadow moved outside, a flicker at the edge of her vision. She sat up, heart pounding, peering into the trees. "Did you see that?" Ryan turned, his body tensing. "Where?" "There," she whispered, pointing to a cluster of pines. The shape shifted again, tall, human-like, hovering just beyond the headlight's reach. Her breath caught, fear clawing up her spine. "Someone's out there." He squinted, his hand tightening around Mia. "Could be an animal. Deer, maybe." "That's no deer," she hissed, fumbling for her phone as if it could help. The figure lingered, motionless now, a dark outline against the night. Then with a rustle it was gone, swallowed by the woods. Naomi exhaled, her pulse still racing. What the hell was that? "Probably nothing," Ryan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Just the dark playing tricks." She didn't buy it, but she let it go, her nerves too frayed to argue. The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence, Naomi refusing to close her eyes even as exhaustion clawed at her. Ryan stayed awake too, his presence both a comfort and a threat she couldn't shake. Dawn broke slowly, gray light filtering through the trees. Mia stirred, yawning against Ryan's chest, and he handed her back to Naomi with a gentle smile. "She's a good kid." "Yeah, she is," Naomi said, cradling her daughter close. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she forced herself to focus. "So what now?" "We just sit here." "Not exactly," Ryan said, stepping out into the morning mist. He popped the hood again, pulling a small multi-tool from his backpack, a sleek, high-end thing that looked out of place in his rough hands. Naomi watched, skeptical, as he tinkered with the engine, his movements quick and precise. "You're wasting your time," she called, buckling Mia into her seat. "You said it was the fuel pump." "Thought so," he muttered, not looking up. "But it might be the line instead. Give me a sec." A sec turned into 10 minutes, then 20. Naomi paced beside the car, her frustration mounting, until the engine sputtered, coughed, and roared to life. She stopped dead, staring at him. "You fixed it." "Told you I've got tricks," he said, wiping his hands with a grin. "Should get us to town, at least." She gaped, torn between relief and disbelief. "How'd you even... Where'd you learn that?" "Long story," he said, climbing back in. "Let's just say I've had to figure things out before." Naomi slid behind the wheel, the engine's rumble a lifeline she hadn't expected. "You're full of surprises, Ryan." "You have no idea," he replied, his tone light but his eyes distant. As they pulled back onto the road, the woods fading behind them, Naomi's mind churned. A man who could fix a car with a pocket tool, who carried himself like he owned the world, who didn't flinch at shadows in the night. Whoever Ryan was, he wasn't just a stranded hiker, and the truth, she sensed, was closer than ever to breaking free. The sedan rumbled back to life under Ryan's deft hands, its engine growling like a beast reluctantly stirred from sleep. Naomi slid behind the wheel, her hands still shaky from the sleepless night and that fleeting shadow in the woods. The gray dawn light bathed the trees in a muted glow, but the unease lingered, a weight pressing against her chest. Ryan climbed in beside her, wiping his hands on his jeans, his grin too casual for a man who'd just resurrected her car with nothing but a pocket tool. "You're full of surprises, Ryan," she said, her voice edged with exhaustion and suspicion as she pulled onto the road. "You have no idea," he replied, his tone light but his eyes flickering with something she couldn't place. Amusement, maybe, or a secret itching to slip free. Mia yawned in the back seat, clutching her blanket, and Naomi forced a smile for her daughter's sake. The town wasn't far now, and with it, the end of this strange detour. She'd drop Ryan off, pocket his cash, and put this night behind her. That was the plan, at least. The woods thinned as they drove, giving way to rolling hills and scattered houses. The sedan rattled over the uneven pavement, the muffler still grumbling from its earlier injury, but it held. Naomi's mind churned, replaying the night. The truck's headlights, the figure in the trees, Ryan's calm under pressure. He wasn't just some guy with a dead car. That watch on his wrist, the way he carried himself, the ease with which he'd fixed her engine. It all pointed to something bigger. But what? "Turn left up here," Ryan said, breaking her thoughts. His voice was steady, directing her like he'd walked these roads 1,000 times. She glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "Thought you didn't know where you were going." "I said I'd figure it out," he replied, that faint smirk tugging at his lips. "This'll get us where I need to be." She didn't argue, too tired to push back. The road curved through a quiet stretch of countryside, the houses growing larger and farther apart, their lawns manicured and gates gleaming. Naomi's stomach twisted as the scenery shifted. Gone were the modest bungalows, replaced by sprawling estates that screamed money. She'd never driven through this part of the county before, and the contrast to her cramped apartment stung like a fresh wound. "Right here," Ryan said, pointing to a narrow lane flanked by towering oaks. She turned, the sedan's tires crunching over gravel, and the trees parted to reveal a sight that made her breath catch. A massive mansion loomed ahead, its stone facade glowing in the morning light, windows stretching 3 stories high. A fountain bubbled in the circular driveway, and sleek cars, none of them broken-down wrecks, lined the garage visible through an iron gate. Naomi slammed on the brakes, the sedan jerking to a stop. Her mouth fell open, her heart thudding as she stared. "You live here?" she said, her voice cracking. "This place is like a small country." Ryan chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "I told you I wasn't a serial killer." She whipped her head toward him, her exhaustion giving way to stunned disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me. This is your house?" "Home, sweet home," he said, his smirk widening as he unbuckled his seatbelt. "Thanks for the lift, Naomi. You're a lifesaver." She blinked, her mind racing to catch up. The damp jacket, the muddy boots, the stranded hiker story. It didn't fit. Not with this. The mansion wasn't just big. It was the kind of place you saw in magazines, the kind of wealth she couldn't even fathom. Her hands tightened on the wheel, the cracked upholstery of her sedan a stark reminder of the gulf between them. "You're rich," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Like, really rich." "Something like that," he replied, echoing his earlier vagueness with a glint in his eye. He reached into his backpack, pulling out a thick stack of bills, far more than the extra he'd promised. "For your trouble. And the car." She stared at the money, her throat dry. It was more cash than she'd seen in months, maybe years. "I can't take that," she said, though her voice wavered. "That's too much." "You earned it," he said firmly, pressing it into her hand. "Trust me, I've got plenty." Her fingers closed around the bills, the weight of them grounding her even as her head spun. "Who are you?" she demanded, her suspicion flaring anew. "No one lives in a place like this and ends up stranded on a highway." Ryan paused, his hand on the door handle. "Let's just say I needed a break from all this," he said, gesturing vaguely at the mansion. "A hike gone wrong, a car that didn't cooperate. You were my lucky break." "Lucky," she echoed, her tone sharp. "You've got a funny way of showing it." He laughed, a low, genuine sound that softened the edges of her frustration. "Fair point. But I mean it. Thanks. For everything." She didn't know what to say, her mind a tangle of questions and exhaustion. Mia stirred in the back seat, peering out the window with wide eyes. "Pretty house," she mumbled, rubbing her face. "Yeah, it is," Naomi said, her voice softening as she glanced at her daughter. She turned back to Ryan, studying him, the unshaven jaw, the tired but handsome features, the confidence that now made sense. "So what now? You just go back to..." Whatever this is? Something like that, he said again, stepping out into the driveway. But maybe I'll see you around. Doubt it, she shot back, though a flicker of curiosity betrayed her. I don't exactly hang out in places like this. You never know, he said, his eyes locking with hers for a moment longer than necessary. Then he shut the door, gave a small wave, and headed toward the gate, his figure shrinking against the grandeur of the mansion. Naomi sat there, the engine idling, the stack of cash heavy in her lap. Her gaze drifted from the money to the house, then back to Mia, who was humming softly. She'd gotten them through the night, through the rain, the breakdown, the shadows, and now this. A stranger's fortune, a lifeline she hadn't expected. But the questions lingered, sharp and insistent. Who was Ryan, really? And why did she feel like this wasn't the end of their story? She shifted the sedan into gear, pulling away from the mansion as the gate clanged shut behind Ryan. The road stretched ahead, leading her back to her own world, rent, daycare, the grind of survival. But as the trees closed in around her, she couldn't shake the sense that something had shifted, that the man she'd picked up in the rain was more than he'd let on. And somewhere, deep down, she wondered if he'd meant it, if she'd see him again. The drive back was quiet, Mia's humming the only sound against the rumble of the engine. Naomi's fingers brushed the bills in her pocket, her mind racing. Rich didn't cover it, not with a house like that. Was he some kind of businessman, an actor? The watch, the tool, the way he'd handled the car, it all pointed to a life she couldn't imagine. And that truck in the night, the figure in the woods. Were they tied to him, too? She glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights again, but the road was empty. For now. As the familiar streets of her town came into view, she let out a long breath, the weight of the night settling into her bones. She'd survived it, more than survived, with enough cash to keep the landlord off her back. But Ryan's smirk, his parting words, lingered like a promise she hadn't agreed to. "Mommy, are we home?" Mia asked, her voice sleepy. "Almost, sweet pea," Naomi said, forcing a smile. "Almost." But as she turned toward their apartment, the mansion's shadow loomed in her mind, a question mark she couldn't erase. Ryan wasn't just rich, he was something else entirely. And whether she liked it or not, she had a feeling their paths weren't done crossing. Naomi guided the sedan away from the mansion, the iron gate clanging shut behind Ryan as he disappeared into his world of stone and wealth. The engine rumbled, a familiar comfort against the surreal morning, and the stack of bills in her pocket pressed against her thigh, a lifeline she still couldn't fully process. Her hands gripped the wheel, steering them back toward the familiar grit of her own life, the peeling paint of her apartment building, the daycare bills, the endless shifts. Mia hummed in the back seat, her tiny voice weaving through Naomi's tangled thoughts. The mansion faded in the rearview mirror, but its shadow clung to her. Ryan's parting words, "Maybe I'll see you around," echoed in her mind, teasing her with their ambiguity. Who was he, really? That house, those cars, the ease with which he'd tossed her, more money than she'd seen in months. It didn't add up to a stranded hiker. And the night's oddities, the truck, the figure in the woods, gnawed at her, hinting at a story he hadn't told. She shook her head, forcing her focus back to the road. He was gone now, a strange chapter closed. She had the cash, enough to breathe for a little while. That was what mattered. "Mommy, are we home?" Mia asked, her voice thick with sleep as she rubbed her eyes. "Almost, sweet pea," Naomi replied, her smile tight but genuine. The town's edges came into view. Gas stations, strip malls, the diner where she'd clock in again tomorrow. Normalcy beckoned, but as she turned onto the main road, a sleek black SUV pulled up behind her, its tinted windows gleaming in the morning light. Her pulse quickened, memories of the truck flashing back, but it kept its distance, trailing her silently. She tightened her grip on the wheel, glancing at Mia. "Just a car, baby," she murmured, more to herself than her daughter. It followed her for another mile, then peeled off down a side street, leaving her heart thudding. Coincidence, she told herself. Just her nerves, frayed from the night. But as she parked outside Ryan's mansion again, wait, no, she hadn't meant to loop back. She realized she'd taken a wrong turn, her exhaustion steering her in circles. The gate swung open, and Ryan stepped out, his damp jacket swapped for a crisp shirt, though his boots still carried traces of mud. He waved her down, and she cursed under her breath, rolling to a stop. "What now?" she muttered, cracking the window. "Thought you'd be halfway home by now," he said, leaning against the frame, that smirk playing on his lips. "Got turned around," she admitted, her tone clipped. "Long night." "Tell me about it," he said, his eyes flicking to the sedan. "You okay to drive? You look like you're about to crash." "I'm fine," she snapped, though her hands trembled slightly. "Just dropping you off was the plan, not a tour of your kingdom." He chuckled, unfazed. "Fair enough. But hold up a sec. Someone's got something for you." Before she could protest, a man emerged from the mansion's entrance, tall, gray-haired, dressed in a crisp suit that screamed old money. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone used to giving orders, and in his hands was a thick envelope. Naomi's stomach dropped as he approached, his polished shoes clicking against the driveway. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice smooth and formal, "on behalf of Mr. Walker, I'd like you to have this." She stared at the envelope, her suspicion flaring. "What's that?" The man, Ryan's butler, she guessed, offered a faint smile. "A token of gratitude for your assistance last night." Ryan stepped closer, his hands in his pockets. "Take it, Naomi. You deserve it." She hesitated, then snatched the envelope, peeling it open with shaky fingers. Inside was a stack of crisp $100 bills, $10,000, by her quick count. Her breath caught, the weight of it hitting her like a punch. She looked up, her eyes wide, first at the butler, then at Ryan. "You're joking, right?" "No joke," Ryan said, his tone steady. "You got me home, kept me from a worse night than I'd already had. That's worth something. Worth this." She held up the envelope, her voice rising. "This isn't something. This is insane. I don't take charity." His brow lifted, a spark of intrigue flashing in his hazel eyes. "It's not charity. It's payment for a job well done." "Job," she scoffed, shoving the envelope back toward him. "I gave you a lift, not a kidney. I'm not some damsel you get to save with your money." The butler stepped back, his expression neutral, but Ryan didn't budge. He took the envelope from her outstretched hand, his fingers brushing hers briefly, and set it on the car's hood. "You're not a damsel," he said, his voice low. "You're tougher than most people I know. That's why I'm giving it to you, not because you need saving, but because you earned it." She glared at him, her pride warring with the reality of her life. $10,000. It could pay the rent, fix the car, give Mia the pancakes she'd been dreaming of, and more. But it felt wrong, like a transaction she hadn't signed up for. "I don't need your pity," she said, her jaw tight. "It's not pity," he countered, stepping closer. "It's respect. You didn't have to stop for me. You didn't have to trust me even a little. But you did, and you got us through. Take it, Naomi. Or don't. Your call." She stared at the envelope, her chest tight. Mia's soft humming drifted from the back seat, a reminder of why she fought so hard every day. She could say no, drive off with her head high, but what then? Another eviction notice? Another missed meal? Her fingers hovered over the money, then pulled back. I can't, she said, finally, her voice thick. Not like this. Ryan tilted his head, studying her with a mix of surprise and something deeper. Admiration, maybe. You're stubborn as hell, he said, a grin tugging at his lips. I like that. Yeah, well, enjoy it from a distance, she shot back, sliding into the driver's seat. We're done here. Not quite, he said, his tone shifting, less playful, more deliberate. I'll see you again, Naomi Carter. She froze, her hand on the key. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged, stepping back toward the gate. Just a hunch. Drive safe. The butler retreated silently, and Naomi stared at Ryan as he turned away, his broad shoulders disappearing through the gate. She grabbed the envelope, despite herself, and tossed it onto the passenger seat, her heart pounding. $10,000. A fortune she'd refused, yet couldn't leave behind. She started the engine, the sedan sputtering as she pulled away, her mind a storm of pride and doubt. The black SUV appeared again as she hit the main road, trailing her for a block before vanishing into traffic. Her pulse spiked, but she shook it off, chalking it up to paranoia. Ryan's words lingered, though. I'll see you again. Like a promise she didn't want to believe. He wasn't just rich. He was something else, something powerful, and her gut told her this wasn't the end. Mia yawned, breaking the silence. Mommy, can we have pancakes now? Naomi glanced at the envelope, then at her daughter's hopeful face. Yeah, baby, she said, her voice softening. We'll get pancakes. As she drove toward home, the weight of the money and Ryan's gaze stayed with her, a thread pulling her back to a man she barely knew. He'd seen her pride, her fight, and instead of walking away, he doubled down. Why? The question burned, unanswered, as the town swallowed them up. The mansion, a memory, but not a distant one. Not yet. Naomi drove away from Ryan's mansion, the envelope of $10,000, a heavy presence on the passenger seat, its crisp edges taunting her resolve. The sedan rattled as she merged onto the main road, Mia's soft promise of pancakes echoing in her ears. She'd refused his money, mostly, but couldn't leave it behind, a compromise that gnawed at her pride. Ryan's parting words, "I'll see you again," rang like a challenge, and the black SUV's fleeting shadow in her rearview mirror only deepened the unease curling in her gut. She gripped the wheel tighter, the town's familiar streets a lifeline pulling her back to reality. The rest of the day blurred into routine, dropping Mia at daycare, counting the cash from Ryan to cover rent, and scrubbing the exhaustion from her face before her night shift at the diner. She didn't spend the $10,000, not yet, but tucked it into a coffee can under her sink, a secret she wasn't ready to face. Sleep came in fits, haunted by headlights and Ryan's smirk, until the alarm dragged her back to work the next morning. The diner buzzed with its usual chaos, truckers grumbling over coffee, kids smearing ketchup on tables, when everything shifted. Naomi was wiping down the counter, her apron stained from a spilled milkshake, when her boss, Carl, stormed out of the kitchen. His face was red, veins bulging at his temples, a look she'd seen before but never aimed at her. "Carter," he barked, slamming a handful of crumpled receipts onto the counter. "You think I wouldn't notice?" She froze, the rag dangling from her hand. "Notice what?" "Don't play dumb," he snapped, jabbing a finger at the receipts. "Money's missing from last night's till. $20 short, and you were the last one closing." Her stomach dropped, the accusation hitting like a slap. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "You know me, Carl. I've been here 3 years. I know you're broke," he cut in, his eyes narrowing. "Rent's late, kids' daycare. People get desperate." "I've seen it before." "I'm not a thief," she said, her jaw tightening. "Check the cameras. I locked up like always." "Cameras were off," he said, his tone cold. "Convenient, huh? Pack your stuff, Naomi. You're done. The words landed like a punch, knocking the air from her lungs. You're firing me? Over $20 you can't even prove I took. Prove you didn't, he shot back, turning away. Get out before I call the cops. She stood there, trembling with fury and disbelief, as the diner's chatter faded to a dull roar. Customers stared, some averting their eyes, others whispering. She yanked off her apron, tossing it onto the counter, and stormed out, the bell above the door jangling like a mocking farewell. The cold morning air hit her face, but it couldn't cool the fire in her chest. Fired, falsely accused, and now jobless with Mia to feed and a landlord who wouldn't wait. She slumped against the sedan, her breath fogging in the chill, and fought the tears prickling her eyes. She'd been here before, rock bottom, but this time it stung deeper. The coffee can money loomed in her mind, a lifeline she'd resisted, but desperation clawed at her resolve. She was reaching for her keys when a shadow fell across the pavement and a familiar voice broke through her haze. Rough day. Naomi's head snapped up. Ryan stood there, hands in his pockets, his damp hiking jacket replaced by a tailored coat that screamed wealth. His hazel eyes locked on hers, that faint smirk tugging at his lips, and for a moment she couldn't decide if she wanted to scream or swing at him. What are you doing here? She demanded, straightening. You stalking me now? Passing through, he said, his tone too casual. Saw you storm out. What happened? None of your business, she snapped, turning to unlock the car. But the weight of the morning crashed down, and the words spilled out before she could stop them. My boss just fired me. Thinks I stole $20 I didn't touch. So yeah, rough day. Ryan's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of something. Concern, maybe. He's an idiot, he said, stepping closer. You're not a thief. You don't know that, she said, her voice sharp. You don't know me. I know enough, he replied, his gaze steady. I saw you last night, how you handled everything. You're real, Naomi. Honest. That's rare. She snorted, crossing her arms. Great. Honesty doesn't pay the bills. What do you want, Ryan? Another lift? No, he said, his voice dropping, deliberate. I want to offer you something. A job. She blinked, caught off guard. A job? What, cleaning your mansion? He shook his head, a faint smile returning. I need someone for my daughter. A caretaker. She's 5, a handful, and I'm tired of the revolving door of nannies chasing my paycheck. I need someone real around her. Someone who isn't after my money. Her mouth opened, then closed, the absurdity of it hitting her. You're serious? You want me to look after your kid? Why not? He said, shrugging. You're good with Mia. You've got grit. And frankly, I'd rather have you glaring at me than some fake smile stranger kissing up. She stared at him, her mind racing. A job. With him. In that mansion, with his secrets and his cash, and whatever else he wasn't saying. You don't even know if I'm qualified, she said, her suspicion flaring. What's the catch? No catch, he said, his tone firm. Decent pay, room if you need it, and a chance to stick it to jerks like your boss. You in? She hesitated, the diner's door looming behind her, a symbol of everything she'd lost in 10 minutes. Mia's face flashed in her mind, those big eyes, that trust she'd killed to protect. Ryan's offer was a lifeline, but it came with strings she couldn't see. Why me? She pressed, her voice low. You could hire anyone. Because you're not anyone, he said, his eyes locking with hers. You stopped for me. You didn't back down. My daughter needs that. Someone who fights. The compliment hit her harder than she expected, stirring something she hadn't felt in years. Pride, maybe. Or hope. She glanced at the sedan, its dents and rust a mirror of her life, then back at Ryan. I'll think about it, she said finally, her tone guarded. But I'm not saying yes yet. Fair enough, he said, pulling a card from his pocket and handing it to her. Call me when you decide. Or don't. Your move. She took the card, simple, black, with just his name and a number in gold print, and tucked it into her pocket. Don't hold your breath, she muttered, climbing into the car. Wouldn't dream of it, he replied, stepping back with that damn smirk. Take care, Naomi. She drove off, the diner shrinking in the mirror, Ryan's figure a solitary silhouette against the gray sky. Her heart pounded, a mix of anger and possibility swirling in her chest. Fired, broke, and now this. A job from a man she barely knew, tied to a world she didn't trust. She picked up Mia from daycare, the little girl's chatter a balm against the storm in her mind, and by the time they got home, she'd made her choice. Okay, she said into the phone that night, Ryan's card crumpled in her hand. I'll do it, but this better not be a mistake. It won't be, he replied, his voice warm with something she couldn't name. See you tomorrow. She hung up, staring at the coffee can, the envelope, the life she was leaving behind. Ryan's daughter, his mansion, his mysteries, they loomed ahead, a path she couldn't predict. She'd accepted, but as she tucked Mia into bed, a shiver ran through her. She was stepping into his world now, unaware of what waited, unaware that fate had more in store than she could ever guess. Naomi hung up the phone, Ryan's voice. See you tomorrow. Still humming in her ears as she stared at the crumpled card in her hand. The decision to take his job offer settled over her like a heavy coat, warm but unfamiliar, its weight both a comfort and a warning. Mia slept soundly in the next room, her soft breaths a reminder of why Naomi had said yes, why she'd stepped into the unknown of Ryan's world. The diner's betrayal still stung, Carl's accusation a fresh scar, but this was a chance to claw her way back, to give Mia more than a life of scraping by. She tucked the $10,000 deeper into the coffee can, her pride bruised but intact, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she'd face Ryan's mansion again, his daughter, and whatever came with them. The next morning she dropped Mia at daycare, her stomach a knot of nerves as she drove to the address Ryan had texted, a sprawling estate that made the mansion she'd seen look like a guest house. The gate buzzed open, and she parked the sedan beside a row of gleaming cars, its dents glaringly out of place. Ryan met her at the door, his casual jeans swapped for a sharp blazer, though that easy smirk remained. Welcome to the chaos, he said, leading her inside. The foyer alone could have swallowed her apartment, all marble floors and soaring ceilings, but his daughter, Lily, stole her focus, a whirlwind of 5-year-old energy with dark curls and Ryan's hazel eyes. She barreled into Naomi's legs, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. You're Mia's mom? Lily asked, peering up with unabashed curiosity. That's me, Naomi said, crouching to her level. And you're Lily, right? Cool dinosaur. Lily grinned, thrusting the toy forward. His name's Rex. He eats bad guys. Good to know, Naomi said, glancing at Ryan. She's a firecracker. Told you she's a handful, he replied, his tone warm. You're still in? Too late to back out now, she said, standing. Let's see what you've got. The day unfolded in a blur. Lily's chatter, games of hide-and-seek through endless hallways, and a quiet moment where Naomi caught Ryan watching her, his gaze lingering longer than it should have. She brushed it off, focusing on the job, but the mansion's opulence and his steady presence kept her off balance. By evening, she'd survived, and Ryan's nod of approval felt like a small victory. She'd expected a week of this, caretaking, proving herself, but the next morning he threw her a curveball. Lily's with her tutor today, he said over coffee in a kitchen bigger than her childhood home. But I could use you somewhere else. Temporary assistant gig at my office. You up for it? She frowned, setting her mug down. Assistant? I thought this was about your daughter. It is, he said, leaning against the counter. But things are a mess at work, and I need someone I can trust. It's just for a few days. Better pay, too. Her suspicion flared, but the word pay hooked her. What's the catch? No catch, he said, his eyes steady. Just paperwork, calls keeping me sane. Say yes, Naomi. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but I'm not your coffee girl. Wouldn't dream of it, he said, that smirk flashing. Let's go. The office was a gleaming tower an hour's drive away, the kind of place that screamed power, glass walls, bustling employees, and a logo she vaguely recognized, Walker Tech. Naomi's jaw tightened as she followed Ryan inside, her sneakers squeaking against polished floors. He owned this? The stranded hiker ran a tech empire? She filed the questions away, focusing on the stack of files he handed her, her new desk a temporary island in his sprawling domain. Days blurred into a rhythm, sorting contracts, fielding calls, watching Ryan command rooms with that same quiet confidence she'd seen in the rain. He was good at this, sharp and decisive, but he'd pause to ask her opinion, his trust in her growing with every task. She hated how it felt, reassuring, steady, like he saw her in a way no one else did. And she hated how her guard slipped, how his laugh or a brush of his hand against hers sparked something she didn't want to name. Then Melissa walked in. It was late on a Friday, the office quieting as Naomi typed up notes from Ryan's last meeting. The door swung open and a woman strode in, tall, blonde, dripping in designer clothes and disdain. Her heels clicked like gunfire, and her smirk was a weapon aimed straight at Naomi. "You're the new girl," Melissa said, her voice honeyed with venom as she leaned against the desk. "Ryan's latest project, I assume." Naomi's fingers stilled on the keyboard, her spine stiffening. "I'm his assistant. Who are you?" "Melissa," she said, her smirk widening. "His ex-fiancée. And you really think a guy like Ryan is interested in someone like you?" Naomi's jaw tightened, her temper flaring. "I'm here for a job, not a fairy tale. If you've got a point, make it." Melissa laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Oh, I will. He's generous, picks up strays, fixes their little lives, but don't get comfortable. You're not his type." "Neither are you, apparently," Naomi shot back, standing to meet her gaze. "He's not here. Try his phone." Melissa's eyes narrowed, but before she could retort, Ryan appeared in the doorway, his expression darkening. "Melissa, what are you doing here?" "Just checking on your charity case," she said, tossing her hair. "She's cute, Ryan. Very earnest." "Enough," he said, his voice low and firm. "Leave." Melissa smirked one last time at Naomi, then sauntered out, her perfume lingering like a threat. Naomi exhaled, her hands clenched, and turned to Ryan. "Your ex, huh? She's a real peach." "She's a headache," he said, rubbing his neck. "Sorry about that. She's been stirring trouble since we split." "Trouble like what?" Naomi asked, her suspicion sharpening. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Just noise. Ignore her." But Naomi couldn't. Melissa's words burrowed under her skin, and the next week, whispers followed her, co-workers eyeing her, rumors of stolen files she hadn't touched. She confronted Ryan in his office, slamming a memo on his desk. "Someone's saying I took confidential docs. This your ex's doing?" He scanned the paper, his jaw tightening. "Probably. She's petty enough." "Petty?" Naomi snapped. "This could ruin me. I've got a kid, Ryan. I can't afford this." "I'll handle it," he said, his voice steady. "You're not going anywhere." She wanted to argue, but his certainty stopped her. He leaned closer, his hand brushing hers as he took the memo, and the air shifted, charged heavy. "You're good at this, Naomi." he said, softer now. Better than you know. Her breath caught, the compliment hitting too close. Just doing the job, she muttered, pulling back, but his gaze held hers, warm and searching. The space between them shrank, a pull she couldn't deny, and when he smiled, small, real, she felt it in her chest. Days later, he drove her home after a late night, the sedan parked at the office for once. Mia slept in the back seat, and the quiet stretched, intimate. "You're not what I expected," he said, glancing at her. "Back at you," she replied, her guard softening. "Still don't know half your story." "Stick around," he said, his voice low. "You might." She didn't answer, but the possibility lingered, a thread tying them tighter. Secrets hovered, Melissa's schemes, Ryan's past. But so did something else, a spark neither could ignore. As he pulled up to her apartment, his hand lingered on the gear shift, close to hers, and Naomi stepped out, her heart racing, unaware of how deep she'd already fallen. Naomi stepped out of Ryan's car, the night air cool against her skin, as his hand lingered near hers on the gear shift, a silent pull she felt, but didn't acknowledge. Mia slept in the back seat, her soft snores a tether to reality amid the strange warmth blooming in Naomi's chest. Ryan's words, "Stick around, you might," hung between them, a quiet invitation she wasn't ready to answer. She muttered a quick "good night" and hurried inside, the weight of his gaze following her up the stairs. The apartment door clicked shut, and she leaned against it, her heart thudding. This job, this man, it was more than she'd bargained for, and the line between survival and something deeper blurred with every glance he threw her way. The next week at Walker Tech was a whirlwind. Melissa's venomous whispers lingered, rumors of Naomi's incompetence, hints she'd been caught snooping. But Ryan shut them down, his authority a shield she didn't ask for but couldn't refuse. She buried herself in work, organizing his chaotic schedule, dodging Melissa's icy stares, and stealing moments with Lily when the girl visited the office. The 5-year-old's laughter softened the edges of Naomi's days, and Ryan's quiet, "You're a natural," over lunch one afternoon hit her harder than it should have. She brushed it off, but the ease between them grew, a rhythm she couldn't shake. His hand brushing hers over a file, his voice low as he thanked her for staying late. Friday arrived, gray and heavy with rain, and Naomi found herself alone in Ryan's office, sorting through a stack of contracts he'd asked her to review. The tower hummed with the muted energy of a skeleton crew, most employees gone for the weekend. She was mid-page when the door creaked open, and Ryan's voice drifted in. Not to her, but to someone else. She froze, her pen hovering, as he stepped into the adjoining conference room, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, she's still here," he said, his tone casual, almost amused. "Naomi, the one I told you about." Her stomach tightened, instinct urging her to stay still. She shouldn't listen. Knew it, but the way he said her name pinned her in place. "Curiosity, mostly," he continued, a laugh threading through his words. "Picked her up off the highway, figured I'd see what she's made of. She's scrappy, though, tougher than half the suits in this building, keeps me on my toes." The words landed like a fist, sharp and cold. Curiosity. A test. Her breath caught, the contracts blurring as humiliation burned up her throat. She'd been a game to him. An experiment born from a rainy night, not trust, not respect. Every late night, every shared glance, every time he'd leaned close, it crumbled into nothing, a rich man's whim she'd been too naive to see. "Anyway," Ryan went on, oblivious, "she's good with Lily, so it's not a total loss. We'll see how long she sticks." The call ended with a click, and Naomi's hands trembled as she shoved the papers aside. Her chest heaved, anger and shame warring inside her. She'd fought for this, swallowed her pride, faced Melissa's barbs, let her guard slip. For what? To be his amusement? She grabbed her bag, her movements jerky, and stormed toward the door just as Ryan stepped back into the office. "Naomi?" His brow furrowed, surprise flickering across his face. "You're still here?" "I'm done," she said, her voice low and shaking. "I quit." He blinked, stepping closer. "What? Hold on, what's going on?" "I heard you," she snapped, her eyes blazing. "On the phone. Curiosity. That's why you hired me, right? Some little project to keep you entertained." His face paled, realization dawning. "Naomi, wait, that's not—" "Save it," she cut in, shoving past him. "I'm not your toy. Find someone else to play with." "Naomi," he called, but she was already moving, her sneakers pounding the polished floor as she fled the office. The elevator dinged and she slipped inside, her breath hitching as the doors closed on his stunned expression. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back, fury carrying her through the lobby and out into the rain-soaked street. The sedan waited in the lot, a battered refuge, and she climbed in, slamming the door. Her hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white as the truth sank in. She'd let herself believe in the job, in him, in something more. And it was all a lie. The engine sputtered to life and she peeled out, the tower's lights fading in the mirror as she drove toward home, toward Mia, toward the life she knew. Ryan stood frozen in his office, the echo of her words ringing in his ears. "Damn it," he muttered, raking a hand through his hair. He'd meant it as a joke, a half-truth to a friend, but hearing it through her eyes twisted it into something cruel. He grabbed his coat, the contracts forgotten, and bolted after her, his boots slipping on the wet pavement as he hit the parking lot. Her car was gone, tail lights swallowed by the rain, and he cursed again, his chest tight. He'd messed up. Badly. Curiosity had brought her here, sure, but it wasn't the whole story. She'd become more, her fire, her honesty, the way she challenged him, and he'd let her think it was nothing. He climbed into his own car, the sleek engine roaring as he sped toward her apartment, the need to fix this driving him through the storm. Naomi burst into her place, the door banging shut as she dropped her bag, her breath ragged. Mia was still at daycare, the silence deafening, and she sank onto the couch, her hands covering her face. Humiliation burned, but beneath it, hurt, raw and sharp, cut deeper. She'd trusted him, let him in, and he'd made her a fool. The coffee can sat on the counter, a reminder of his money, his world, and she wanted to hurl it against the wall. Her phone buzzed, Ryan's number flashing, but she ignored it, letting it ring out. She wasn't his experiment anymore. She'd pick up Mia, find another job, claw her way back without him. The resolve hardened, but as she grabbed her keys, a knock rattled the door. Urgent, insistent. "Naomi!" Ryan's voice came through, muffled but desperate. "Open the door, please." She froze, her heart lurching. He'd followed her. Part of her wanted to let him stand there, soak in the rain, but the other part, the part still tangled in his gaze, wavered. She yanked the door open, her eyes blazing. "What do you want?" "You," he said, breathless, water dripping from his hair. "Not like that. Not a game. I screwed up, okay? I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "Then how'd you mean it?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Because I heard you loud and clear." He stepped closer, his hands raised. "I was curious. Yeah, at first. You were this force, Naomi, stopping for me, fighting through everything. But it's more now. You're more. I need you here. With Lily, with me." She shook her head, tears spilling despite her fight. "I'm not your charity case, or your curiosity." "You're not," he said, his voice raw. "You're the realest thing I've got. Don't go." She stared at him, the rain drumming outside, her heart a battlefield. He meant it, she saw it in his eyes. But the hurt lingered, a wall she couldn't breach. "I can't," she whispered, stepping back. "Not now." Naomi, he started, but she shut the door, the lock clicking with finality. She slid down against it, her breath hitching as his footsteps faded, the storm swallowing him whole. She'd walked away, but the truth, his and hers, left her reeling, a wound too fresh to heal. Naomi slumped against the apartment door, the lock's click still echoing as Ryan's footsteps faded into the rain. Her chest ached, a raw mix of hurt and fury. His words, "You're the realest thing I've got," clashing with the sting of curiosity she couldn't unhear. She'd shut him out, her pride a fragile shield against the humiliation, but the silence that followed was suffocating. Mia's toys littered the floor, a reminder of the life she'd fought for, and the coffee can on the counter mocked her. $10,000 she'd refused to touch, now a lifeline she couldn't reach for. She wiped her eyes, forcing herself up. She'd survive this. Without him. Without anyone. She always had. The next morning she picked up Mia from daycare, pasting on a smile as the little girl babbled about her day. The phone stayed silent, no calls from Ryan, no apologies, and Naomi buried herself in job listings, her fingers trembling over the screen. Waitress gigs, cleaning shifts, anything to replace Walker Tech. But the rejection from him cut deeper than Carl's firing, a wound she couldn't name. She'd let herself hope, and it had burned her. Days blurred into a haze of applications and dead ends. The landlord's knock came on a gray Tuesday, his voice gruff through the door. "Rent's overdue, Carter. You've got till tomorrow or you're out." "I'll get it," she said, her throat tight, but the coffee can loomed in her mind. She could use it, swallow her pride, pay him off, but every bill felt like Ryan's pity, a chain she'd broken free from. She scrounged what she could from her last tips, a measly $200, and slid it under his door that night, a plea for more time. It wasn't enough. Wednesday morning the eviction notice was taped to her door, stark and final. "Vacate by noon," it read, and her landlord stood there, arms crossed, as she packed. "Told you, Naomi, can't keep waiting." She didn't argue, her voice gone as she stuffed clothes and Mia's toys into trash bags. Mia clung to her leg, confused. "Mommy, where are we going?" "Somewhere new, sweet pea," Naomi said, forcing brightness into her tone. "An adventure." But her hands shook, the weight of failure crushing her. No job, no home. Rock bottom had found her faster than she'd feared. The shelter was a last resort, a squat brick building on the edge of town. The intake worker's pitying smile burned, but Naomi signed the forms, her jaw tight, and carried Mia inside. The room was small, 2 cots, a shared bathroom down the hall, but Mia's chatter about the big sleepover kept Naomi from breaking. She'd hit lows before, but this was different. This was her daughter sleeping on a thin mattress, her tiny world shrinking, because Naomi couldn't hold it together. Days stretched into a grim routine. She pawned her phone for cash, keeping just enough for bus fare to job interviews that went nowhere. The shelter's fluorescent hum and the coughs of other residents filled her nights, and Mia's energy dimmed, her usual spark dulled by the damp, crowded space. Then, on a frigid Monday, Mia woke burning up, her forehead hot against Naomi's palm. "Mommy, I don't feel good," she whimpered, curling into Naomi's side, her breaths shallow. Panic clawed at Naomi's chest. "It's okay, baby," she said, her voice trembling as she pressed a damp cloth to Mia's skin. The fever climbed, Mia's eyes glassy, and by afternoon a rattling cough shook her small frame. Naomi scooped her up, the shelter's nurse shaking her head. "She needs a doctor, now." The hospital was a bus ride away, Mia limp in her arms as Naomi counted the coins in her pocket. $3.47, not enough for a visit, let alone medicine. The ER's sterile chaos swallowed them, and a nurse took Mia's vitals, her frown deepening. "Pneumonia, maybe," she said. "We'll run tests, but you'll need to cover the bill." "I don't have it," Naomi admitted, her voice breaking. "Please, Just help her." "We'll do what we can," the nurse said, but the pity in her eyes was a knife. Mia was wheeled away, and Naomi sank into a plastic chair, her hands empty, her world unraveling. She'd failed Mia, failed herself, and the coffee can's shadow loomed, a bitter regret she couldn't undo. Across town, Ryan sat in his office, the city skyline a gray blur beyond the glass. The past week had been a fog, Naomi's exit replaying in his mind, her hurt a weight he couldn't shake. He'd tried calling, stopped by her apartment, but she'd vanished, the door locked and silent. He'd pushed too far, said too little, and lost her. Lily's questions, "Where's Naomi?" cut deeper each day, and his own guilt gnawed at him. She wasn't a curiosity, not anymore. She was a hole in his life he hadn't expected. His assistant buzzed the intercom. "Mr. Walker, a call from St. Mary's Hospital. They're asking about a Naomi Carter." His heart stopped. "Put it through," he said, snatching the phone. The nurse's voice was clipped, professional. "We've got a patient here, Mia Carter, 3 years old. Her mother's with her, but they're uninsured, and the kid's sick. Pneumonia, we think. You're listed as an emergency contact from a daycare form." Ryan's breath caught, the room tilting. "How bad is it?" "She's stable, but we need payment to keep treating her," the nurse said. "Ms. Carter's in a tough spot." "I'm on my way," he said, already grabbing his keys. "Cover whatever they need. Bill me. Don't let them stop." He sped through the rain, the hospital's lights a beacon as dread coiled in his gut. Naomi, evicted, broke, Mia sick. It hit him like a freight train. He'd driven her to this, pushed her away when she'd needed him most. The ER doors slid open, and he found her in the waiting room, hunched over, her face buried in her hands. She looked up, her eyes red and hollow, and the sight broke him. "Ryan?" Her voice cracked, confusion warring with exhaustion. "What are you doing here?" "They called me," he said, kneeling beside her. "Mia's daycare had my number. Naomi, why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" she snapped, her voice rising. "That I'm a failure, that I lost everything. You don't get to swoop in now." "I'm not swooping," he said, his tone raw. "I messed up, I know that. But Mia's sick and I can help. Let me." She stared at him, tears spilling over. "I can't pay you back, I've got nothing left." "I don't want payback," he said, his hand hovering near hers. "I want you safe. Both of you." The nurse interrupted, her clipboard in hand. "Ms. Carter, we're admitting Mia. Mr. Walker's covering the costs." Naomi's head snapped up, her breath hitching. "You did what?" "It's done," Ryan said, standing. "She's getting what she needs. No strings." She rose, her fists clenched, torn between gratitude and fury. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said, his voice soft. "But I'm here anyway." She turned away, following the nurse to Mia's room, and Ryan trailed behind, his chest tight. The little girl lay in a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, her face pale but breathing steadier. Naomi sank beside her, brushing her hair back, and Ryan watched, helpless, the devastation of her fall crashing over him. He'd lost her trust, but he could fix this. He had to. As the rain pounded outside, Naomi whispered to Mia, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, baby." Ryan stood in the doorway, his own guilt a mirror to hers, knowing he'd found her at her lowest, and vowing she wouldn't stay there. Naomi sat beside Mia's hospital bed, her fingers tracing the little girl's damp curls as the IV dripped steadily. The sterile room hummed with quiet machines, Mia's breathing shallow but stable, a fragile lifeline in the chaos of Naomi's unraveling world. The shelter, the eviction, the fever, it had all crashed down, and now Ryan stood in the doorway, his presence a storm she couldn't escape. He'd paid for Mia's care, his wealth a blunt force against her pride, and the gratitude warring with her anger left her raw. She'd whispered an apology to Mia, her voice breaking, and felt his gaze on her, heavy with a guilt she didn't want to acknowledge. Ryan lingered there, his coat damp from the rain, his hands clenched at his sides. The nurse had confirmed Mia's treatment, antibiotics, fluids, a bed for the night, all covered by his credit card, no questions asked. Naomi hadn't looked at him since, her focus locked on her daughter, but his silence pressed against her, a plea she couldn't ignore. She'd hit rock bottom, and he'd found her there, his shadow stretching across the tiled floor like a bridge she wasn't ready to cross. "Naomi," he said finally, his voice low, breaking the stillness. She didn't turn, her jaw tight, but he stepped closer, the door clicking shut behind him. "She's going to be okay. The doctor said it's under control." "Good," she muttered, her hand stilling on Mia's forehead. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," he said, his tone firm. "I wasn't going to let her suffer. Or you." She flinched, the words cutting through her defenses. "I didn't ask for your help," she said, her voice rising despite the hush of the room. "I was handling it." "Handling it?" He moved to her side, his boots scuffing the floor. "You're in a shelter, Naomi. Mia's sick. You can't do this alone. Not right now." Her head snapped up, eyes blazing. "Don't tell me what I can't do. You don't get to fix me." "I'm not trying to fix you," he said, kneeling beside her chair, his face level with hers. "I'm trying to be here. For you." For her, she stared at him, her breath shaky, the fight draining as Mia's small hand twitched in her sleep. The hospital lights cast shadows under his eyes, his unshaven jaw tight with something. Regret, maybe, or desperation. He'd chased her here, paid for Mia's life, and she hated how it felt. Necessary. Inevitable. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why do you keep showing up?" Ryan's gaze held hers, steady and unguarded, and he took a breath like he was steeling himself. "Because you saw me as a person before you knew about my money," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "That night in the rain, you didn't care about my name, my house, any of it. You just helped me. That's why I need you in my life." Her heart lurched, the confession hitting like a wave. She pulled back, her chair scraping the floor, and stood, putting space between them. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you," he said, rising too, his hands open at his sides. "I've been falling for you since that first mile, your strength, your fire, the way you look at Mia like she's the whole world. I messed up, I know that, but it's not curiosity anymore, it's you." The words hung there, raw and unguarded, and Naomi's chest tightened, a storm of feelings crashing through her. Love. From him, a man who'd turned her life upside down, who'd seen her at her lowest and still stood there, offering everything. She shook her head, tears prickling her eyes. "I don't want to be someone's charity case," she said, her voice trembling. I won't be that." "You're not," he said, stepping closer, his voice desperate. "You're everything. You're not a case, Naomi. You're the one I can't let go. I'd give it all up, the money, the company, if it meant you'd see that." She stared at him, the sincerity in his eyes cutting through her walls. The rain tapped the window, a steady rhythm against the chaos inside her, and Mia's soft cough pulled her back. She turned to her daughter, brushing her cheek, grounding herself in the one truth she knew. Mia came first. "You don't get it," she said, quieter now. "I've been on my own forever. Trusting you, it's not that easy." "I know," he said, his voice softening. "I'm not asking you to trust me overnight. Just don't push me away. Let me prove it." She didn't answer, her throat too tight, and he didn't push. He stepped back, giving her space, but his presence lingered, a promise she couldn't unhear. The nurse returned, checking Mia's chart, and Ryan murmured something about getting coffee, leaving Naomi alone with her daughter. And his words. She sank back into the chair, her hand finding Mia's, and let the tears fall, silent and hot. Love. It was too much, too soon, a lifeline she wanted to grab but couldn't trust. He'd paid for Mia's care, chased her here, bared his soul, and she felt it, the pull, the ache of wanting to believe him. But the shelter, the eviction, the sting of curiosity, they were still there, a wall she couldn't climb. Hours passed, Mia's fever breaking as dawn crept through the blinds. Ryan returned, 2 coffees in hand, and set one beside her without a word. She took it, the warmth seeping into her palms, and glanced at him, his tired eyes, his quiet resolve. "Thanks," she muttered, the first crack in her armor. "Any time," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, just barely, and sipped the coffee, the bitterness a mirror to her thoughts. Mia stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and Naomi leaned close, whispering, "Hey, sweet pea." Ryan watched, his love a silent weight, and for the first time Naomi didn't push it away. Not fully. The hospital discharged Mia that afternoon, her cough easing, and Ryan drove them back to the shelter, the sedan towed there earlier at his insistence. Naomi clutched Mia, the little girl's warmth a lifeline, and stared out the window as the town rolled by. "I'll figure something out," she said, more to herself than him. "A place, a job." "You don't have to do it alone," he said, his voice low. "I've got a guest house, empty, yours if you want it. No strings." She tensed, her pride flaring. "I told you." "It's not charity," he cut in, glancing at her. "It's a start. For Mia. For you." She didn't answer, the offer hanging there, and when they reached the shelter, he helped her carry Mia inside, his hands gentle but firm. The other residents watched, whispers trailing them, and Naomi's cheeks burned, but she let him stay, let him sit with her as Mia napped, let the silence stretch. "I meant it," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love you, and I'll wait, however long it takes." She looked at him, her heart a battlefield, and nodded. Just once, a flicker of maybe. The shelter's walls closed in, but his words opened something, a crack, a possibility. And as Mia slept, Naomi felt the weight of his love, heavy but not unwelcome, a truth she wasn't ready to embrace but couldn't fully deny. Naomi sat in the shelter's cramped room, Mia napping beside her on the cot, the little girls breathing steady after the hospital ordeal. Ryan's quiet offer, a guest house, no strings, lingered in the air, a lifeline she hadn't grabbed but couldn't dismiss. His coffee cup sat empty on the floor, his presence a steady hum beside her as he watched Mia sleep. "I'll wait," he'd said, his love a weight she felt in her bones, and though she'd nodded just a flicker, she hadn't let it settle. The shelter's thin walls pressed in, the murmurs of other residents a reminder of her fall, but Ryan's patience chipped at her defenses, a crack she couldn't seal. The next morning he drove them to the guest house, a modest cottage behind his mansion, all clean lines and soft light, a world away from the shelter's damp chaos. Naomi hesitated at the door, Mia's hand in hers, but the little girl tugged her inside, wide-eyed at the space. "It's pretty, Mommy," she chirped, and Naomi's resistance faltered. "Just temporary," she told Ryan, her voice firm, and he nodded, his eyes warm but restrained. Days turned into a fragile routine, Mia recovering, Naomi job hunting, Ryan checking in with coffee or a quiet word. He didn't push, didn't crowd, and the space he gave her let something grow. Trust, maybe, or the ghost of it. She caught herself smiling at his dry humor, lingering when he brushed her arm, and hated how natural it felt. Melissa's venom and the curiosity sting still echoed, But his actions, paying for Mia, chasing her to the hospital, spoke louder, a steady drum against her doubts. Then Melissa struck. It was a crisp Thursday when Naomi returned to the guest house from a grocery run, Mia skipping beside her with a bag of apples. A sleek car idled in the driveway. Melissa's, Naomi knew it instinctively, and the blonde stepped out, her designer coat pristine, her smirk sharp as a blade. "Well, look at you," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Settling in nicely, I see." Naomi's grip tightened on the bags. "What do you want, Melissa?" "To save you some heartache," she said, sauntering closer. "Ryan's playing house, but it's a game. I've got proof, texts, calls. He's been meeting me behind your back, wants me to take him back." Naomi's stomach dropped, the old wounds flaring. "You're lying," she said, but her voice wavered, Melissa's confidence a needle in her resolve. "Am I?" Melissa pulled out her phone, flashing a screen of messages. Ryan's name, times, dates. "He's good at this, stringing people along. You're just the latest." Mia tugged at Naomi's hand, sensing the tension, and Naomi forced a breath. "Get out," she said, her voice low. "Now." Melissa laughed, tossing her hair. "Fine, but when he dumps you, don't say I didn't warn you." She slid back into her car and peeled off, leaving Naomi frozen, the bags heavy in her arms. She didn't tell Ryan, not right away. The texts gnawed at her, a poison she couldn't shake, and when he stopped by that evening, his easy grin faltered at her silence. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting a pizza box on the counter. "Melissa was here," she said, her tone flat. "Says you've been talking to her. Meeting her." His face hardened, a flash of anger crossing his eyes. "She's full of it. I haven't—" "She showed me texts," Naomi cut in, her voice rising. "Your name? Your number? Explain that." He stared at her, then pulled out his phone, scrolling fast. "I haven't texted her in months. Whatever she showed you, it's fake. She's done this before, Naomi. Doctored stuff to mess with people." "Why should I believe you?" she demanded, her chest tight. "After everything. Curiosity, your ex. Why?" "Because I love you," he said, his voice raw. "And I'm done letting her poison this." She didn't respond, her heart a battlefield, and he stepped back, his jaw tight. "I'll prove it," he said, grabbing his keys. "Stay here." He was gone before she could stop him, the door slamming shut. Naomi sank onto the couch, Mia curling into her side, and the doubt churned. Melissa's smirk, Ryan's desperation, a tug-of-war she couldn't win. Hours passed, the pizza cold, when her phone buzzed, a news alert from a local station. She tapped it and Ryan's face filled the screen, live from a press conference at Walker Tech. "I'm setting the record straight," he said into the mic, his voice steady, the room packed with reporters. "Melissa Grant, my ex-fiancée, has been spreading lies, forged texts, fake calls, to hurt someone I care about. I've got the proof here. Server logs, timestamps, showing she hacked an old account. It ends now." He held up papers, his gaze cutting through the camera. "Naomi Carter's no pawn in anyone's game. She's the strongest person I know, and I won't let anyone drag her down. Melissa's done, legally, publicly. That's it." The feed cut to stunned anchors, but Naomi's breath caught, her hands trembling. He'd gone public. Exposed Melissa, risked his name, for her. The door opened and Ryan stepped in, rain-soaked and resolute, his eyes finding hers. "It's over," he said, tossing his coat aside. "She's got nothing left to throw." "You did that," Naomi whispered, standing, Mia peeking from behind her. "On TV?" "For you," he said, his voice low. "I told you I'd prove it." She stared at him, the walls she'd built crumbling under the weight of his stand. Melissa's scheme, cruel, calculated, had been her final test, and Ryan hadn't just passed. He'd burned it down. The doubt that had choked her loosened, replaced by a rush of something, trust, real and unshaken. "Why go that far?" she asked, her voice soft. "Because you're worth it," he said, stepping closer. "I love you, Naomi. No games, no lies, just us." Her throat tightened, tears brimming as Mia tugged her hand. "Mommy, is he staying?" Naomi looked at Ryan, his steady gaze, his quiet strength, and felt the last thread of resistance snap. "Yeah, sweet pea," she said, her voice breaking into a smile. "He's staying." He closed the gap, his hand finding hers, and she didn't pull away. The shelter, the hospital, the mistrust. It faded, replaced by a warmth she hadn't dared hope for. Mia giggled, darting to grab the pizza, and Ryan pulled Naomi into his arms, his breath warm against her hair. "I trust you," she murmured, the words a release, a beginning. "Finally." "Good," he whispered back, his hold tightening. "Because I'm not letting go." The rain eased outside, the guest house a quiet haven, and Naomi leaned into him. The test passed, the future theirs. Melissa's lies were ash, and in their place stood something real, unbreakable, hers to claim. Naomi leaned into Ryan's embrace, the guest house a quiet sanctuary as the rain softened outside. His arms anchored her, his whispered, "I'm not letting go," a vow that settled deep in her chest. She'd said it, "I trust you," and meant it, the weight of Melissa's lies and her own doubts dissolving in the warmth of his hold. Mia's giggle broke the moment, the little girl darting to the cold pizza box, and Naomi laughed, a sound that felt new, unburdened. Ryan's stand, publicly dismantling Melissa's scheme, had been the final push, the proof she'd needed to let him in. The shelter's shadows, the hospital's fear, faded against this, a family, fragile but forming. Weeks slipped by in a gentle rhythm. They moved fully into the guest house, Naomi's pride bending enough to accept it as home, not charity. Ryan scaled back at Walker Tech, trading late nights for dinners with her and Mia, his laughter filling the cottage as Lily joined them. The girls braiding each other's hair or chasing Rex the dinosaur through the yard. Naomi found work, freelance bookkeeping, steady but on her terms, and the coffee can, money stayed untouched, a relic of a fight she'd won. Melissa vanished, her schemes buried under legal threats Ryan didn't hesitate to wield, and the whispers at the office died out, leaving Naomi free to breathe. Ryan's love was quiet but constant. Coffee left on the counter, a hand on her back during movie nights, a look that said more than words. She felt it grow, steady and sure, and let herself fall, the trust she'd fought for blooming into something deeper. Mia thrived, her cough a memory, her joy a mirror to Naomi's own.